When a child begins treatment for cancer, the doctors have a plan. There are protocols and steps to take, medications to give and surgeries to perform. It's a careful order. When a child begins treatment for cancer, each family reacts in its own way. They have to adapt to a new way of living. The routines they had before get put on hold. Often, it's divide and conquer, a family split by thousands of miles. This is how it happened for Joel. When he learned his son Jennings had leukemia, he was at the airport, about to go on a business trip. His wife Lauren called him from the doctor's office, crying as she told him the news. Fast forward a few months, no more business trips. Joel is at Jennings' hospital bed 24/7. I'm Geoffrey Redick, and I make audio stories about the patients and families of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Karina Bland is one of the people I work with. She talked with Joel for hours and wrote a story about him and Jennings for St. Jude Inspire.
When you spend that much concentrated time, when you're the person, you're the parent that the child depends on, it's a role that you take obviously very seriously, and one that he really embraced. A lot of times in families, there's someone you go to when you want to play, there's someone you go to when you need a hug, and he became both parents in that moment, all the time.
While Joel's wife Lauren was at home in North Carolina caring for their other children, Joel was in Memphis at St. Jude, learning how to flush Jennings' central line, how to change the dressing, offering comfort and distractions. And years later, when Jennings was back at square one, it was Joel's blood that gave his son a second chance. We'll get to that part of the story. There's a lot to tell you about first. That's how Joel moves, step by step. He's an engineer.
There's not a lot of deep processing in the moment, right? It's kind of okay, and if he's still alive, and then there's one more thing to do. So let's go do that thing, and then you do that thing, and it's okay. What's the outcome of that? And then based on that, we do this. And so it's just you do the next thing, and that's kind of how we approached it. But yeah, if you do have the quiet moment and you sit down and think about longer term, that's your mind goes to dark places for sure.
He also writes a blog called All In for Jennings, and he's a very good writer. And so that was one of the ways that he kind of not only kept family and friends updated on what was going on with Jennings, but also it was a way for him to analyze his own thoughts, because when you have to write something down and explain it, and you put it down in words, it kind of helps you to make some sort of sense out of a situation that seems so senseless.
It stands out to me that here's a dad who's far from home at St. Jude with his son. Often, the kind of stories that you and I hear about when we're going to tell them, it's the mom in the family in that position.
In their case, and one of the reasons his wife Lauren was so insistent on finding out exactly what was going on with Jennings was that she was about to give birth to twins. So Jennings started chemotherapy treatment at home in North Carolina. And 2 weeks into it, his mom kissed him and took the elevator 2 floors up to the maternity ward to give birth to their twins. And so she was in a position where she had a child who was ill and desperately needed her. And then she also had 2 brand new babies.
He was starting to really lose his hair. And when Lauren really wanted to comfort him and be there, they wheeled her in a wheelchair down from the maternity floor so she could hold him while they shaved his head. And yeah, it was a mess. And then, all that was 5 days before Christmas.
So all of the coming to terms for that family of, okay, this is what we have to deal with now, happened in their home state of North Carolina. Then they came to St. Jude for the first bone marrow transplant.
So they checked into St. Jude on Jennings' 3rd birthday, which is kind of the meanest birthday present you can give a kid. And So the bone marrow transplant was the best, hope for curing Jennings, which the family was able to do using a donation from his sister Carolyn, who was 4.5 years old at the time, but a perfect match.
I remember thinking, not knowing, if the transplant is the best thing out there and the biggest gun against this, why wouldn't you just always just do that? And after you go through transplant, you realize, you don't know what you're asking for.
A bone marrow transplant is tough on a little body.
Any hair anywhere that hadn't already fallen out, fell out, eyelashes, eyebrows, everything gone. He stopped eating, which is typical, but it was something we were really hoping to avoid. So he had a G-tube placed, which is a traumatic experience. And there's just all kinds of things that happen on a transplant floor that don't happen in other care environments because of the risk of the patients there. They're just so immune compromised that means, you get a fever and they're going to poke you, and that's hard to watch.
All those things are necessary. All those things were going to help make Jennings better, but it was really hard for him as a parent to kind of endure that, and he talked about how sometimes, with Jennings was asleep, he would have to go for a walk and kind of just move away from it for a minute.
The days are hard to get through. You don't think long-term, think short-term, get through the, get to the afternoon, get through dinner, go to bed, kind of break it down into manageable chunks of time.
To keep a 3-year-old entertained, reading the same books over and over again, or putting together the same puzzles over and over again, when you yourself are just probably exhausted and scared, but to not let your child feel that, it's a whole different kind of parenting, wouldn't it be?
So Jennings makes it through all of that. And so they get to go back to North Carolina and like rejoin the family. And this is in the summer of 2018. They must have been overjoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the family as a whole was able to spend time together in Memphis. But there's something about going home, isn't there? I mean, it's one thing to be in a strange place that over when you spend that much time there becomes sort of like a second home, but really going home is a whole different thing. And so for them, it was a chance to kind of get back to what their life had been. And really, with the arrival of the twins, who Joel didn't get a whole lot of time to spend with them because he was at the hospital so much.
I'm basically walking into their lives. They're 6 months old. We have their older brother who, now I'm super close with, and he's like, fighting for his life. And so I had very little sympathy for, things that a 6-month-old baby does. And on, Lauren's side, she didn't have that time with Jennings, and she would go long stretches without, feeling connected to him. And, that would impact her relationship with the twins because they were the reason that she couldn't. So, yeah, it was a lot.
It was a chance really for them as a family to kind of get to know each other all over again and to kind of have that time together. Jennings changed really in front of their eyes, right? So his hair grew back and it came in darker and coarser than it had been. And he began to start putting on weight. And so they could kind of see this healthy kind of glow coming back to him. And so for 2.5 years, the family resumed the life that had come to such a sudden halt with his diagnosis, because his checkups were good. He just kept getting stronger. And he got to play with his siblings and play in the forest and jump on the trampoline, all the things that are just kind of staples of childhood.
And then it all slammed shut.
Yeah. So Jennings would continue to have regular checkups, both at St. Jude and also with his local clinic, so that they could monitor his levels and make sure everything was doing great. And it was doing great until November of 2020. And it came back, the result was that Jennings' white cell count was the same as it was when he had been first diagnosed. So Jennings had relapsed. And they are suddenly just like plunged back into this world that they had been sure that they had left behind.
We had been through the this journey before, and for relapse, there's not a different journey. It's the same journey. It's just hoping it works this time where it didn't work last time. And so to be at, back at the beginning of that, looking back down that was hard.
They knew what they would be facing, another bone marrow transplant, another separation, more time away from home. And luckily for them, Jennings didn't really remember what he had gone through. He was such a little guy that his associations with being in the hospital were all very positive, because what he went through with the first bone marrow transplant, he didn't seem to recall any of that. And so for the second transplant, Joel and Jennings made that drive together from North Carolina to Memphis, and the rest of the family was going to pack up and follow after them. But on that drive, Jennings was like, hey, how much longer? He can't wait to get there. And all Joel can think about is knowing what was to come.
The second time around, Joel would be doing more than comforting and changing dressings. The cells for Jennings' second bone marrow transplant came from his dad. St. Jude pioneered a process that uses a donor, usually a parent, who is only a partial genetic match. That process is now used around the world.
The benefit of the transplant in general is that it's different from your original. The downside of the matched sibling is that it's not that different. It'll have a harder time recognizing a leukemia cell, because that leukemia cell came from the stem cells that are very closely matched to it. If it's only half as similar, that new immune system is much more likely to recognize that potential leukemia cell as not from me, and so I'm going to destroy you.
When they were in Memphis in this, these long months after these transplants, each time they got to stay in this particular house. And in the story that you write, you begin with the scene of them leaving that place. Why did you start there?
When we talk about having to be away from home, you do find other places, don't you, that can become like home for you. And that's really what happened to this family, since they were there for so long and two different times.
I remember standing out front looking at the house and kind of, saying bye to the house one last time, because we, spent a lot of time there. Some of the hardest seasons of our life were in that house. So yes, it's hard, but it's more of that place was a comfort and a good thing for us. And so there's good associated with it.
The twins learned to sit up there, and then they learned to walk there. Joel and Jennings would put together these massive Lego projects there. The kids would ride bikes and they would play outside, and it became, I think really what they were doing is inserting as much normalcy into a situation that was, far from normal. And they were able to do this because they had basically a second home. And I was just really intrigued by that, because that whole idea about, where is home? Is it your physical address, or is it as long as you're with the people that you love and that your family is together, that becomes home.
What sticks with you about what Joel told you?
Every so often you come across somebody who tells you something or has an experience that makes you kind of re-examine your own life and makes you much more grateful for what you have. And, for Joel, it was when he was talking to me about how everyone assumes that tomorrow is going to come.
For us, the veil between this life and the next is a lot thinner than it is for a lot of people. You plan for tomorrow and you think about tomorrow, but the truth is you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's true of everyone. And this was true of us. Most people, you don't live in that reality. You live as if you can make plans for tomorrow and tomorrow will happen. And so something like this kind of really does give you that. You do live in that reality. That is how we view a lot of life now, is through that lens of appreciate every day and don't cling too tightly to, what you got planned for next year.
they lived their lives for every moment. And I keep thinking about that. Like, I find myself like, you know how your mind always floats to, you know, what do you have to do at work, or what's going to happen next week, or all those kind of things. And since talking to Joel and meeting Joel, it just has kind of kept me more in the moments of my life, because what he said is true.
Karina Bland is a writer for St. Jude Inspire. You can find her story about Jennings online at stjude.org/inspire. And you can find lots of other stories and videos about patients and their families there. That's also where you can make a donation to St. Jude, stjude.org/inspire. And thanks for your support. This episode was edited by Grace Korzekwa Evans. Louis Graham is the executive producer of St. Jude Inspire. I'm Geoffrey Redick.